Welcome back, it's me, Lou, and I'm here for another action figure review. But today we're going to do a little bit something different. We're going to be talking more specifically about action figure customizing. So if you've been watching some of my videos, you'll know that I kind of dabble in the world of customizing action figures. And at the end of every one of those videos, I'm always trying to encourage people to, if they haven't done so yet, to experiment and dabble in customizing, because I think it's a really fun hobby and it's also a very rewarding one. And the whole task of customizing action figures, it can be very daunting and intimidating to a beginner, especially if you've never done it before. It's so easy to go online and social media and see some of the crazy things people are doing. Some people might sculpt figures from scratch. Other people might 3D sculpt new parts. There's some incredibly talented painters out there, and the work they do is just amazing. But one of the easy things you can do to create a custom is just the simple act of just swapping out heads. There's not a whole lot involved. At the very least, you might just have to modify like a ball joint or a socket. But otherwise, it's so easy to take the head from one action figure and just plop it onto the body of another. And lo and behold, you've created a new variant. Head swapping, it's nothing new. Toy manufacturers do it themselves. And McFarlane Toys right now, they're kind of notorious for doing it with their DC Multiverse line. Now, I love McFarlane's DC Multiverse action figures. I think they're some of the best action figures on the market right now. I collect some of the other action figure lines I collect are like Star Wars Black Series, Marvel Legends, and G.I. Joe Classified. And as much as I love those action figures, every time I see a new McFarlane figure, it always completely floors me. The amount of detail and the craftsmanship and the sculpting that goes into these figures, it's second to none. They give us really beautiful action figures. Now, I know some people out there have some issues with maybe the scaling of the figures, because the scale is not always consistent. The posability, even though they're highly articulated, sometimes they don't feel as playable. But, regardless of those things, I think the end product is always amazing. And McFarlane, God, they've been... I just hate the fact that sometimes, lately they've been doing this thing where they'll give us an action figure and I'll buy it and I think I'm one and done with it. But then McFarlane, they want us to double dip. They want us to come back to the well. And then they'll offer the action figure again. But it'll be the most bare minimum. They're not going to repaint it. Sometimes they'll give us the repaints, don't get me wrong. Some of the repaints are awesome. But sometimes they'll do the simplest thing is swapping out a head on an action figure. And then, they'll sell it to us. And then, of course, I'll buy it because I need it. A recent example of that for me, anyways, is the Flashpoint Batman figure. So they released the Flashpoint Batman figure. I'm a big fan of the Flashpoint Batman character. And I bought it. I loved it. And then not too long later, they gave us the variant, which was the one without where it was like the Flashpoint Batman, but the head was swapped out with the Thomas Wayne head, where it's just Thomas Wayne and not the Batman cowled head. And they've done that before. Like, I think there was those what was it, death metal Robin figures, or where they had like the different heads. There's the Jason Todd figure where there's the variant where it's the first release was the Red Hood, but then they gave us the Jason Todd variant where it's the same Red Hood figure but without the helmet it had, and they just gave us the Jason Todd face. And then I think in the future there's for the new Suicide Squad movie, there's the Peacemaker figure, but then there's going to be the San Diego exclusive Peacemaker figure where it's going to be the same character, but without the helmeted head, and instead it's going to have the John Cena portrait. So yeah, for them to always just do the head swaps and sell us the exact same figures, that's something they've done in the past. They're going to do it in the future, and I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it all that much. It kind of bothers me just a little bit, because there's a part of me that always thinks like, you know, like, why couldn't you just give us the extra head to begin with? Like, you know, Mattel gives us the extra heads in some of their WWE figures. You know, Marvel Legends, they give us the extra heads all the time. But for McFarlane, you know, if they really want us to double dip, they'll just save the extra head for another figure. And I get it, but I don't know. All right, with that being said, we're going to talk about head swapping. So for, you know, if you're a beginner customizer, the easiest way to create a new action figure, or even just what you could call a variant, is just the simple act of swapping out heads. And today we're going to talk about these two very simple figures I made. I have an unmasked Deathstroke figure here, and then I have an unmasked Azrael Batman figure right here. So I really think in the near future they're going to give us a Deathstroke figure without the helmet. I think the Deathstroke look without the helmet's a very popular look. And in some ways, I actually prefer Deathstroke without the helmet just because he has the cool eye patch. And we'll talk about this guy in a second. For now, let's just talk about Azrael. Okay, so the story behind this figure specifically is that, all right, I'm a big fan of the comic book this guy appeared in. He appeared in the Sean Gordon Murphy miniseries, Batman Curse of the White Knight. And in that story, there's a certain point in time where John Paul Valley, aka Azrael, he dons the Batman armor. And I love that comic. I love the Azrael character. And I remember I saw this store at Target once, but then I passed up on it. And then I never saw him again, and it kind of pissed me off because I knew I should have bought it when I saw him. So I resorted to buying them on Amazon, which was a bad idea because if you buy figures on Amazon, you know it's kind of a crapshoot because sometimes the package will come all beat up. And me, I'm kind of a mint-on collector sometimes because I like to collect the DC stuff, and I like to keep it in the box, and I like to hang it on the wall. And for me, it looks amazing just having an entire wall of just like all the DC figs. It looks beautiful. But I got this guy in the mail, and lo and behold, the box is like torn to shreds at the top. And I'm like, oh man, it kind of pissed me off. And I'm like, you know what? I really want a mint on card one. So I found a reasonably priced one on eBay. It was like almost retail. So I ordered that, and then I was thinking to myself, dude, what am I going to do with two Azrael figures? So I'm like, you know what? I could take one out loose and just have it at my desk at work and just fiddle around with it. And I took it out, and it's a cool figure, don't get me wrong, but it's just a heavy figure, and it felt like the joints were a little bit loose on the one I had. I'm like, I can't keep this guy in display. It's going to topple over. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just throw him back in the package. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm not sure if I wanted to display it because it's all beat up and have the other mint one on the way. So I was thinking to myself, you know what I could do is I could just do a head swap and just call it a variant. So I'm like, okay, let's do that. So I have this little bin where I keep all my spare like extra Marvel Legends heads, because with Marvel Legends, you know, they're not shy about giving us extra accessories. So I just have a bin of this dozens and dozens of like extra heads. So I kind of fished around in the bin, and I found this one head. I think it was like from maybe one of the Mercenary figures, or maybe the Hydra 2-pack or the AIM 2-pack. And it's for one of the larger build Marvel Legends figures. Like, you know, like the figures where they have like the larger body frame, kind of like maybe, what's an example? Like Colossus has a larger body. One of the Reaver figures has a larger body. Cable has a larger body. Venom has a larger body. So I found a head in there, and I found two heads. I think I found like an Eddie Brock head, and then I found this head here. And I really like this head a lot just because it had this crazy scar on it. Now, like, it's not accurate to the comic, but there's a scene in the comic where Azrael tussles with Batman in the harbor. And in that comic, Batman knocks the helmet off of him, and then exposes John Paul Valley's face. And I'm like, you know what? I could kind of work with this head. All I need to do is paint the hair gray, give him a beard. And even though John Paul Valley had long hair in the comic, every time he wore the outfit, he kind of tied up his hair in a man bun. So it didn't bother me that much that this guy had short hair, because, you know, it's justifiable because he would tie his hair back in the comic book. So I'm like, let's go with that. I'll repaint the head so it looks like John Paul Valley's, and I'll keep the scar just because it kind of reminds me of that fight scene in the harbor. And, you know, I slapped it onto this body, and lo and behold, it worked. The proportions to the head, even though it's larger than the original Batman head, the proportions fit this larger torso really, really well. And it looks like it's almost made for this body. So I took this head off, and in order to do that, I submerged at least the head in like hot water to soften the plastic. And then I pulled it off the peg, and this is what the peg kind of looks like. It's similar to this. So I popped this off. And in the Marvel Legends head, the socket was too big to fit on here. So I ended up removing the ball joint altogether, and instead I found a screw where the head here fits the socket of this figure, and I just drilled it and screwed it into the body here. So this is the new neck joint for this guy. And I popped it on, and you know, it's like I said, you know, lo and behold, with this simple act of head swapping, I created my own variant of the figure. And if you're wondering why I didn't take the figure out of the tray, it's a nightmare to take out because of this ridiculous cape. And I don't know, it's just a pain in the butt. But so yeah, this is my variant of the armored Batman from the White Knight series. And in some ways, it's, you know, for me, it's kind of like, in my head, it counts as an unofficial variant just because McFarlane gives us the head swaps as it is, you know, for their variants. So it's cool. You know, I have this figure twice over. I have the masked version, and then I kind of have the final battle version where he's not wearing the helmet anymore. And it breathes new life into the character. I mean into the figure. And like I said, you know, it's a new variant, albeit it's an unofficial one. But for me, it's cool. All right, now let's talk about this guy. This is, excuse me. This is Deathstroke as he appears in the Arkham Origins game. Now, I'm saying this up front. I think in the near future, I really believe McFarlane's going to give us a Deathstroke figure without the mask. I personally prefer Deathstroke without the helmet. His helmet, it looks okay. It's kind of silly looking. It's like this armored helmet, but it's like one half's colored orange, the other half's colored blue. But I think there's so much more personality in the character without the helmet. For one, it reveals that Deathstroke, aka Slade Wilson, is a much more grizzled, older gentleman. And I love the fact that, you know, he looks really badass with the goatee. And what's even cooler is that the dude has an eye patch. You know, for me, nothing looks cooler on a mercenary bounty hunter guy than an eye patch. You know, once he masks up in that helmet, he kind of has an anonymity about him, and he becomes more mysterious than imposing. You know, once he takes the helmet off, you see this guy for what he is, and it's like the eye patch says it all. You know, this guy is badass. He's seen lots of battles, and the gray hair kind of shows that he's lived, you know, he's lived to see another day. You know, this guy's been around, and I love that look about him. So for this guy's head, I had a DC Classics Deathstroke figure produced by Mattel. I had a spare one just because over time, that figure, the quality control on some of the Mattel DC Classic figures, it's horrible. Especially after time, some of the figures, their joints get stuck, and it's a pain in the butt, and sometimes you don't realize the joints are stuck until you start moving stuff, and then they break. And in the case of my Deathstroke, his bicep swivel got stuck. And then I was moving it around, and then I didn't realize the joints have been frozen, stuck. And then it's like, I don't know, it broke, and I was like, oh, I lost the figure. But at the same time, you know, I was able to salvage the head. And I'm like, you know, I have this cool head left over. You know, I could probably do something with it. So one day I was at Target, and I found another one of these, because I already had this guy to begin with, but I found another one of these, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy another one, and I'm just going to put the unmasked Deathstroke head on it and see what it looks like. And then I did, and it looks really, really cool. And here it is, you know. So the ball joints on this guy, I believe it works, but it's the socket's the right size, but I think it's too deep. So the head's a little bit loose on here, but it's a snug fit. It's not going to fall off. It's just a little bit loose, and I can live with that since I'm just displaying this mint on card. So yeah, you know, the simple act of swapping out a head on a toy could give you a new variant on an action figure. Now I call this a very loose custom because I didn't really do much outside of just swapping out a head. But for the person out there who's a beginner and they want to dabble in customizing, you know, swapping out body parts is a cool thing to do. You can create new characters, or you can just create unmasked versions of like characters you already have. And it just breathes new life into it, and it just gives you a variant, which is a cool thing to have. You know, it's always nice to have two versions of a figure. Like, it's cool that you could have, like, on one hand you can have like a Spider-Man that's fully masked up, and then on the other hand you can have an unmasked Spider-Man where it looks like Peter Parker. You know, likewise for me, it's cool that I could have a Deathstroke figure on one hand, but then on another hand I could have him as displayed Slade Wilson unmasked, you know, with the eye patch and everything. So, let me grab Azrael real quick. So yeah, you know, customizing doesn't have to involve a lot of work. If you're new to this, just the simple act of like swapping out heads could give you a new figure altogether. And I highly suggest that if you haven't customized a figure yet, you go out and do so. Whether it's repainting a figure, swapping out body parts, or, you know, just whatever. It's a fun hobby. Go on to social media, check out Instagram, and just search the world of customizing, and you'll discover an entire plethora of artists and skilled artisans out there, and people that could craft amazing things. And you know, there's so much going on out there that people are doing to make their figures that much more better. You know, whether it's 3D printing parts, sculpting stuff, or even making an entire action figure from scratch. You know, it's really cool to see what people are doing, and it's very inspiring. And if you haven't been bitten by the customizing bug, you know, chances are after your first custom, you just might. So I highly suggest it's a road you take, and just give it a try. I think you'll have a lot of fun. Well, with that being said, let's wrap this up. Once again, my name is Lou. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope that you found something insightful in it, and I hope you found this also to be worthwhile. I know sometimes my videos could run a little bit long, but, you know, I try to, you know, in my head, I always want to produce daily content that's, you know, dependable and insightful and worth your time. And hopefully you found those, you know, you found this to be worthwhile. So feel free to stop by anytime, and I will talk to you later. Take care.